Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. All right, so recently it was announced that the United States and other countries are going to have promised armored vehicles to Ukraine. Now, some people are referring to these as tanks. What is being sent there are not, well, I think the French ones are light tanks. They're just a fraction of the size and capability of a main battle tank. None of these that are being sent are main battle tanks, such as an M1 tank, etc. Most of the vehicles that have been promised to Ukraine by all of these countries are not what you think of as a tank. When you think of a tank, you're thinking of an M1 or a T-72, etc. But that is not what has been promised to them. And by the way, it's going to take months for any of these to arrive, even for the first ones. Most of these are amped up troop carriers, such as the Bradley, which is the main one I am going to talk about. These have got light armor, and their purpose is to transport infantry troops to the front lines. That's what their purpose is. Now, I know a bit about the Bradley because it was introduced into the U.S. Army system back in the early 80s or mid 80s when I was a U.S. Army mechanic. So there are a few things you need to know about the Bradley, okay? Yeah, and this one, just like many of the others, do not have a traversable turret. The Bradley has got a front-mounted, I think, 25 millimeter cannon, which is, like a tank has something like a 105 millimeter cannon. So to give you the power, an idea, this is a small diameter, low, it will not fire a long distance. That's not the purpose of that gun on this tank. It is to protect the infantry as they are exiting the vehicle. And then the Bradley has got gun ports along the sides of the vehicle that the infantry can, put their weapons through these gun ports and fire before exiting. Now, the armor on the Bradley drew a lot of controversy when it was introduced, because after it was introduced into the system, it was announced that the armor on the Bradley was so light that an M16 could pierce the hull of a Bradley vehicle at close range. So if it gets hit by any kind of anti-tank weapon, artillery shells, whatever, it's just toast. The Bradley at this point in the U.S. Army system is considered a surplus vehicle. So I am not really sure that replacement parts are still being produced for the Bradley. Much of the same is true with the vehicles that are being sent by Germany and France. From what I understand, these are obsolete vehicles that are no longer being produced and part of their frontline active arsenal. Another thing about the Bradley is that it takes special training. While I was in the Army, it took special training. You got your MOS, and then after your MOS, you've got a skill identifier. So people that went through the training to work on a Bradley had a special identifier after their MOS. This, you take a look at all of the disparate equipment that is being sent into Ukraine, and all of it and all of these things require special training parts that may no longer be produced, and so forth and so on. This is unsustainable. If it breaks down, if it gets damaged, then it's basically useless, unless they're just taking parts from two broken vehicles to put one together, one working vehicle together. Over time, you're just going to keep on winding up with fewer and fewer of these. If they ever make it to the front lines at all, some of them are so old. You know, the Bradleys are 40 years old. You know, if they make it to the front line without breaking down, if they make it to the front line before the Ukrainian forces absolutely collapse, which just seems more and more like that is going to happen any day now. You know, Solidar is basically a one battle. Russia has really taken Solidar. It's just a matter of days before this is official. Bakhmut is much the same thing. Now, on January 6th through 7th, Russia had, announced a truce, a ceasefire, and Ukraine refused to honor this. In fact, 1 minute after midnight, they launched an attack into Russian territory. If you really want, all of this combined, if you really want peace, wouldn't you have wanted at least a 2-day truce? This was to honor the Orthodox Christmas, which they observe Christmas on January 7th. That was the reason for the truce. If you really wanted peace, wouldn't you want them to honor this truce for at least so that people were not dying on Christmas, on what they observe as Christmas? Now, I would. But now, Russia actually did honor that truce. They did not make any, in the terms of, they did not make any aggressive attempts and at an advancement. They did respond, of course, to Ukrainian attacks that were launched against them. You can't just say, I'm just not going to fire while someone else is firing on you. That makes sense. Today is the 8th, and so the truce is over. And now, Russia responded to the attack on their military barracks, where I think 89 people died, and they attacked 2 barracks where mostly foreign fighters were being housed, and allegedly took out over 600 forces that were on the Ukrainian side. Now, going back to these armored vehicles, this was part of another $2 billion package being promised by the Biden administration to Ukraine. The thing to understand about all of this is that even though the Bradleys are old, obsolete, not part of our primary arsenal anymore, the amount of money that the U.S. taxpayer is going to pay for these is not as surplus equipment. We will be paying the full amount for these vehicles to produce, replacements. So the ones who actually win out of all of this are the military-industrial complex. That's it. That's who wins here. The Ukrainians aren't winning anything by any of this. The Russians aren't. This is just more debt being imposed on the U.S. taxpayer. And we will be paying for it for generations. Not years, generations. It means your children, your children's children are going to be paying these debts that are being run up for this purpose right now. Is that going to help us? Condoleezza Rice and somebody else already admitted that Ukraine is a welfare state. Their economy has collapsed. They are going to be a welfare state that needs constant assistance from the West for decades. Decades. There's no end in any of this in sight for the debt that's being imposed. There's no end in sight to the suffering that is being caused by all of this, because the people being killed have families. They have children who are losing their parents. And for what? So that Ukraine can keep lines on a map. That's what this is all about. Sovereignty. When they keep on talking about sovereignty, they're talking about lines on a map. They're not talking about the welfare of their people. They're not talking about their economy. They are talking about lines on a map. That's what it's about. Why are those lines on a map so important? That you will slaughter entire populations. Hundreds of thousands of people injured and killed. Cities destroyed. Mass refugee crisis. Europe, they're economy being crushed. All of this. So that weapons manufacturers can get richer. That's what it is. And power. To try and prove that the West is more powerful than Russia, even though Russia was selling gas to Europe. Oh, they're trying to, make Europe dependent on Russian gas. Europe is going to be dependent on somebody for their energy. Why not Russia? So, here's what I am expecting to happen. Once the Ukrainian front line does actually collapse, which is not far off, then I expect that Russia will advance up to the line where the 2014 Donbass border exists. And then once they reach that point, then I expect that they're going to stop and say, okay, now let's have peace talks. What option is going to be available to Ukraine at that point? They're not going to have an economy. They're not going to have an electrical system. They're not going to have a viable military defense. What choice are they going to have? They could have been at the negotiating table long before now. They could have been at the negotiating table in February. They could have been at the negotiating table and honoring the Minsk Agreement any time since 2014. But they have refused every step of the way. What are the options available for Europe at this point with their industries moving to other countries, including the United States? But the United States is laying people off right now. Who are these industries going to sell to once this happens? If Europe doesn't have an economy, who are they going to be selling to? India and China produce their own goods. India's economy is rising. Their manufacturing base is rising. China's coming out of lockdown slowly. Who are they going to sell to? If they move to the United States, they're not going to be selling to Europe because Europe isn't going to have an economy. If they remain in Europe, who are they going to sell to? Who knows? This has been planned. This is intentional. It's about more than peace. It's about the global economy. We are now in a multipolar world. We have to accept this. This was just the final step in bringing us to this point. There's nothing else. Unless we change our own systems. Unless we change our own attitudes. No more of this Western hegemony, American, exceptionalism. We need to change our worldview. There is no other choice. The days of American dominance over the planet are over. All right, share this video. talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign. And I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.